Welcome to Make That Paper, the show where we talk about all the crazy jobs we do to make the cash we need to pursue our artistic dreams.
And for a camelback water bank, because between global warming and unfair business practices, this summer of strike demands serious hydration.
It does, but this is the day we get into the Marines routine, talk about hydration, join the Prewar Corps, and experience the GI Bill thrill. We are your hosts, Jaime Parker Stickle
and Jason Bieber.
And on today's episode, we welcome a phenomenal writer who was named one of Granta's 20 Best of Young American Novelists and was a finalist for the PEN/Hemingway Award. And his book, Dear Mr. President, was chosen as one of the 10 best books of the year by GQ.
Yeah, he's the host of the popular Kurt Vonnegut radio podcast, was the editor-at-large for McSweeney's for over 10 years.
Wait, the McSweeney's. The McSweeney's.
For over 10 years.
So cool.
And teaches at Columbia University, where he received a 2021 fellowship from the Humanities War and Peace Initiative.
We are so honored to have him join us. So please welcome the brilliant Gabe Hudson to the Make That Paper podcast. Oh my God. Yay. I am so excited. I remember.
Excited. Thank you so much, Jamie and Jason, for having me on. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a big fan of the show.
Yeah.
I'm such a big fan of yours. Can I just tell you, so I graduated my MFA in 2020, 3 months after the pandemic was announced. So basically, my graduation was online, and my lecture was online. Everything was online, and so I had joined Twitter, but I had never been on Twitter. It was just to preserve my name and account on it.
Right.
But so I joined Twitter, and here's Gabe Hudson, this famous author, interacting with all my cohort from MFA, and I was like, "Why? Do you know him? Can you introduce me?" And they're simultaneously like, "No, he just responds to authors." And I was like, "Shut up!" And so we had a game. It could have been a drinking game, but few of us drink, and we were like, let's see if Gabe likes our tweet, let's see if he likes our response. We had a game. It was amazing. You were so cool. You're like our hero. We were like, this is amazing.
That's amazing to hear, because from my perspective, definitely not what I'm seeing out there on the timeline. I was just I put a bunch of effort into Twitter because of the pandemic, and I was living on Cape Cod kind of by myself, so I was trying to make friends, and I was putting a lot of effort into it. And then the community that grew out of it was just extraordinary. And yes, I love all of the West Coast affiliates associated with you all. I mean, you all did that MFA under Todd Goldberg's program, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Love Todd, love all of those people. I'm so grateful for them being online. They become great friends,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the room the first time Kevin Bacon finds out about 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Right? I tell people all the time, if you lived in LA long enough, and you can't say this about New York, it's not the same. You can't say it about Chicago, a little bit about Chicago, but LA is the epicenter. Even though writers come out of New York, and that's where publishing is, et cetera, LA is the epicenter of relationships. If you stay in LA long enough, you will know everybody in the country that has done, as an artist, that has done anything. Yeah. You're 1 degree away from everyone. And knowing Todd Goldberg, who's my mentor, is just knowing everybody.
I did an interview with him a while back, and he had the most amazing stories about his childhood. I don't know if you've heard them, but they're wild, and I love him to such a high degree. And then the way he talks about his grandfather, who was this mentor, I just think the world of him. So such a cool guy.
He's a cool guy, yeah, and so supportive. I mean, he actually helped me get my first adjunct professor position this year, which was one of my goals. But it's so funny because my lit agent was like, Jamie, she's like, I want to get some early book blurbs for you before we go to publishers with your book. And I was like, great. And she's like, make me a list of authors. And so I make a list of authors, and she's like, Jamie, all these people are friends with Todd Goldberg. And I'm like, you find me someone that's not friends with Todd Goldberg, and we'll talk. This is an impossible mission. Who's he not friends with?
It is incredible. I mean, there is Yeah, there was somebody else that recently was like appointed to a position that Todd is good friends with. I think did an MFA with you. No, he did Bennington, but is like friends with Todd. I think he went to
Oh,
Bennington with Todd.
yeah.
But yeah, just the degree to which Todd supports people. Todd was supportive of me getting my podcast, original podcast off the ground. Like, I don't know that I would have had the courage to do it were it not for his encouragement. So
Yeah.
it's I love the internet for that, you know?
Yeah. 100%.
And
Yeah. It's
and
amazing.
I have to retract. I realize that Todd Goldberg is Kevin Bacon.
Yes, I think
Well,
that's
that's what you were saying. I mean, I understood that. I
yeah,
understood that. Yeah.
yeah,
So here's what I think is super interesting. And my understanding of the military was limited to I had a grandfather that quit college to go enlist for World War II. And then my
yeah,
second grandfather was an immigrant and he had to leave the U.S. to go fight for Canada. He became a bombardier and he taught flight school and stuff for World War
yeah.
II. But
Very
so
cool. I mean, that's all fascinating. Yeah,
yeah. And then they stopped teaching when it got to Vietnam in my history classes. And my dad was not in Vietnam, he was in college. And then, like, I didn't understand that there was
right, right.
military beyond that because I think, like, I was one
Yeah,
of
yeah,
those
yeah,
sheltered children. So my parents, like, put blinders on us and put, like, college prep, college prep, college prep.
yep,
So I didn't know that you could join the military. This is how naive I am. Until I went to Michigan State University and one of my dorm mates was in the reserves. And I
yeah.
was like,
There you go. Yeah,
tell me more. And it was a girl. And I was like, tell
yeah.
me more. And you, when did you join out of high school knowing,
No,
okay, let's talk
so
about that.
yeah, I actually have a funny trajectory that I've been more and more candid about as I get older because I figure I'm gonna die soon anyway. And it's not like I was trying to hide it before, but like if you look at me on paper, I look like I've received all these fellowships from
Oh,
fancy
gosh.
universities, Ivy League schools and stuff. So it looks
Yes.
like one thing, but the truth is I have a GED. I'm a high school dropout. And I dropped out of high school in my junior year. I
I
moved
love
up to
it.
Austin, Texas, and I went to Austin Community College for 1 year. And if you had a 3.0 average or above back then, you just seamlessly transfer into UT Austin. So that's what I did.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I then got into UT Austin. Everyone was like, wow, this guy's got some magic tricks. How do you do that? And then I proceeded to just do terribly because I like didn't go to class and had a lot of fun. And so I was on a rocky road again. I was on the ropes again. And I had always been interested in the Marine Corps and in military and in war, in large part because I was reading a lot of like Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian.
Shut up. That's
Yes,
insane. Oh my God.
it's such a peculiar
I
recruiting
don't,
poster.
yeah,
Oh
I don't
my
understand
God.
how that like I understand how it would interest you, but I don't
Yes.
understand how it would seduce you.
Yeah, for me, I'd be well, that's not actually, I agree with you because, which is why I do true crime now. Like and why I want to be an investigator. And I do get it.
Yeah,
What I'm saying is, let's put a period on that. I
yeah,
get you.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And
I need an explanation. Please go.
So there was like, if you look at that book, I mean, it's just all about war and one of the main
yes.
characters, the judge, who's sort of like the stand-in for the whale, because the whole thing is like kind of lifted from Moby Dick. Like the first three words of Moby Dick are call me Ishmael. The first three words of Blood Meridian are see the child. Like there's a rhythm there. And
Yeah.
the judge pontificates about war as if it's like the ultimate divinity. And it's he has this one quote where he says, until a man, a lot of this stuff is very patriarchal, probably toxic masculinity. But he says, until a man looks into the horror of the round and realizes that that speaks to his innermost heart, he will never be able to dance. Like there's all this sort of Nietzsche, nihilism woven in there. And it's
Wow.
very archetypal. It's very
Yeah.
seductive. So I wanted to know, like, I kind of knew I was a white boy from the suburbs. I wanted to get dirty so that I would have something to write about. So the Marine Corps just seemed, and also I was like a big soccer guy when I was in high school. I was like the star, so it was really weird when I quit.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that for a second because you look like an Abercrombie and Fitch model. Like you look at pictures of Gabe Hudson, and he's like big blue eyes. He is the poster child for American meat and potatoes, but like Abercrombie, right? Like gorgeous. So,
but inside, I am like a tiny little woman. I'm 6'4", but inside, I am a tiny little woman. I kid you not. 6'4". That is the true thing. Yeah. But I will say, let me say this about like the most sort of superhuman Marines that I encountered. They were not like me. Like I look like a certain kind of thing, but actually the regular sized person with no bells and whistles, that's the person that can do the extraordinary things. That's what I saw time and time again.
Yeah. Yeah. I've hung out with a couple of Marines and this one guy, Rudy Reyes, he's like a fitness guru. That's his new thing, but same height as me, same everything, but the guy just was superhuman. You see, we're superhuman, and
you just see them do things where you're like, whoa, how okay, that's amazing. I loved it. I love being around those people. I love being around the diversity. You mentioned his last name, Reyes. I was an enlisted Marine, so the officer class is very different. That's a privilege thing. People have a college degree. They choose to go in the military amongst many other good choices they have in life. But in the enlisted, you got a bunch of desperate characters who basically jump through that Marine Corps portal because life in civilian world was not working out. And like I met immediately guys who'd been living in their car for the last 2 years, dealing drugs on the coast of UC Santa Cruz. And like someone kind of put a hit out on that dude and he had to get out of there quick, join the Marine Corps. Like just these real characters that you'd never get to meet anywhere else. And I'm so grateful for that. It changed my life.
You were saying that you wanted to join the Marines so you would have something to write about. Was writing still, was writing already your ultimate goal?
Yeah. For whatever reason, I had been telling people that my father is like big, kind of like I would say like a big intellectual. Like he reads the big books and he's a big believer in books. And, he didn't come from a lot. So this was something he discovered in college. And then it's sort of like he converted to this religion of just, classical music, the whole thing.
Wow.
So like he read to me like Theodore Roethke's poems. He read to me Huckleberry Finn when I was 8. He was like reading major literature at my face as a kid. We didn't have a TV. We didn't have a lot of money. And it was great because it was like an entertaining time. And my parents divorced when I was 5. I'm a child of the 70s, that whole big divorce epidemic that happened then. And so those were very special times for me to like listen to somebody read to me like that. And I was an only child. I just would go to the library every weekend, get like 18 books and read them. I mean, that is really how I learned how to become a human. It's not from my parents, but from books teaching me about like morality and different kinds of people and stuff.
Yeah. My grandmother was similar in that she dropped out of school when she was 16, and she was an avid reader. She was more worldly than people who go through school with multiple degrees because all she did was read. And she would bring me boxes of books to support my love of reading and writing. I shouldn't have been reading these books. And my son today at like 8 years old is like, can I read this book? And I'm like, absolutely not. Fully knowing I was reading worse than what he's asking me.
Right. But I had a very specific, very personal to me and to us question. You said you were 8 when your father read you Huckleberry Finn. Last night, I was looking for a book to read to our 8-year-old, Jack, and I saw on the shelf, I don't even know how it got there, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And I was like, oh, this would be maybe not yet. And I have to ask you, how did Huckleberry Finn go over at 8?
It went over great because I think I'm weird. Like when I went in the Marine Corps, they tried to turn me into like a killing machine. Literally, they're like, we're going to make you a killing machine. I was a rifleman and I was like, yeah, but what they didn't turn me into a killing machine. What happened is my humanity grew and I learned how to love people from all different walks of life, that kind of people I'd never met before, different,
Yeah.
ethnicities, race, whatever.
Yeah.
So I tend to take a positive thing out of a thing. So Huckleberry Finn, I think I took away all the like mischievous spirit. And, when he says, God damn it, I will go to hell, because he's not going to be racist anymore. Like, that's what I took from it. I took from it like a boy who's surviving with his wits and creativity. And I did not take from it the N word and stuff like that. And I'm a little horrified as I tell that story about my father, who I know was well meaning. I don't know. I don't have a recollection of him reading the N word. So I'm like, did he or didn't he? I don't know, but it's kind of horrific to think that. But so, yeah, I completely understand you being a little cautious about exposing did you say your son?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I read Tom Sawyer when I was 9. When I showed up to 4th grade on the first day, and I had Tom Sawyer in my backpack, I was almost done, and I had Huckleberry Finn, because my grandma had given them to me. I remember Miss Taylor, the 4th grade teacher, saying, "Are you reading these?" And I said, "Well, I'm done with Tom Sawyer and I'm about to start Huckleberry Finn." And the next day, I was put into the 5th grade class.
Yeah.
Because my comprehension level of she was like, we're not going to keep you in 4th grade. And that tells me a lot, not about me, but about those books and what they're assuming that we're understanding or taking from them, right? As a child. And I think you're right, because one, I don't think the words should be removed from the book, as,
Right.
don't reset history. Like, let's not wash it away. But also, I don't remember those words in it as I read it, for the same reasons, as that wasn't where my focus was. My focus was on Huck and Tom and their development in this coming of age, and the
resistance to racism and slavery.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been sort of devoutly anti-bigot all through my life. I think it's just because of all these books that told me what the right thing was, and I felt it in my heart, and some of those books made me cry, and so it was very easy for me not to be that way growing up.
So what was it like in enlisted in the military? Because you were enlisted versus choosing it as and we know there's a difference, because our friend's dad chose it after college to be an officer versus enlisting.
Yeah. Enlisting is just like, you go to your recruiter and you're like, hey, what can you do for me? I think because of the Iraq war, from what I've been reading a bunch of those memoirs of those people, and there's a lot more opportunities. Like, you could be very specific about the track you want to be on, but this was like right around the first Persian Gulf War, 1991.
Okay.
And so, it was like the Marine recruiter was like, well, I said, I want to go infantry. And I've been watching all those like Vietnam War movies, like Full Metal Jacket.
Yes.
Platoon. That stuff really seeks in your psyche. And my father had served during the Vietnam War. And so, but he never cared about that. And like, he let my little brother wear his army uniform around the house as like a costume or something. He didn't care, but I still knew my dad did it. And so the legacy of the Vietnam War was something I felt acutely, like that toughness, that craziness. What was that? Seems like everybody kind of lost their mind. And when you're young, at least when I was young, you kind of want to lose your mind a little bit too. You're like, I think I could lose my mind right now a little. So I went into the recruiter in Austin, Texas, and he was like, he was looking at my transcripts. He's like, well, you have actually pretty good grades. Like, I could put you behind a computer and you'll have a fancy job. It'll be cool. I was like, no. I have to go into the infantry. Like, I want to be a ground pounder, a grunt. That's what I know. I know I want to do that. And if you don't do that for me, I'm not going to sign up. And he was like, are you sure that's the worst one that we give to people? I said, that's what I want. And so I got it. I was a 0311 rifleman. And I'll tell you, those months leading up to boot camp, because we didn't really have the internet in the same way to research it and stuff.
Right.
It was really quite anxiety inducing.
Well, if you're just watching, Full Metal Jacket and
they give you the recruiter
Deer Hunter.
Yeah, Deer Hunter.
Oh God, that messed me up, that movie.
You were starting to say something that they wanted to turn you into a killing machine. They were and essentially you were starting to say that they failed. You had been saying that they sort of failed to do that and instead brought out more of your humanity. And,
Yeah.
you know, you also said that you were on this journey as a writer,
Hmm.
seeking, you know, your not purpose, but like to become well-rounded. So you had something to write about. Can
Yeah.
you kind of talk to us, because so many of the people who come on the show talk about the jobs they had and how, you know, waiting tables at this restaurant inspired this play they wrote or something like that. And can you kind of tell us how that journey obviously didn't go the way you planned, but maybe took you in the way that it was supposed to?
Sure. And what's interesting is I think it did also kind of take me in the way that I planned. Like
Oh,
I
really? Okay.
was potentially a killing machine. I mean, I was pretty wild and tough at that time. I fought some. I remember I went back to Austin and I was with my college friends and I got like in a fight with these bikers in a back alley and I like romped one of them real hard and not in a way
Mm.
that a college kid normally would. And my friends were like, what the heck is, but I'm not saying I was the toughest. There was a zillion tougher guys than me, a
Yeah.
zillion. Um, but that process was like, I'm an only child. I think I didn't realize this until I got older, did therapy. I think I've been very lonely for like a lot of my life. And so suddenly I'm sleeping in a bunk with 70 guys in a barracks and we're waking up together and we're going to the bathroom together. We're showering, we're bleeding, we're crying together. I saw guys at the beginning of training who couldn't even climb up a rope. Like, but by the end of it, they were just going up and down that thing like a jelly bean. I mean, it was like you watch people become amazing in front of your face and do
Mhm.
things that before they couldn't do. And you saw people under intense duress, how they handled that duress, whether they be shouting at, or like if somebody is made to do something in a terrible position for a couple hours, or if they take you out front and there's like sand pits and they bend you, they call it you get bent. And I think they call it something else now, but they just make you do like push-ups, jumping jacks, leaping frogs, just like a crazy amount of stuff till you basically expire in the sand and you are a mess.
Wow.
And I was doing that. I was getting in trouble a fair bit. Like I was a
Mm.
troublemaker, but I was also very devoted to like my guys. So, um, I'm trying to think of an example of what I witnessed or how my humanity grew. I mean, there's little moments. Like I remember there's this big black guy from Louisiana next to me, Jackson. He's a couple inches taller. He's just a sweetheart, sweetest dude on earth. He was just reading letters one day. And I said, what's going on? What's up, Jackson? What you reading? And he was like, my pastor writes me these letters every week. And they're like the most important thing in my life. So I read them. And it's just like, you just don't hear that. Like you just don't, I never saw that before in my life. Or when we showered, it's like dudes would have they'd be like former Aryan guys, at least I think they were, but they would have the tats all on their back. And then there'd be like gangbangers from LA, Hispanic dudes with tats on their back. And it showed like who they were before versus who they are now. And in now, we're all together. And
Mm.
it really felt profound to me. And
Yeah.
at the end of boot camp, they do this really peculiar thing where I never heard anyone talk about it. It's called a gong show. And, you're scared of your DIs. For 3 months, you're scared. And all of a sudden, they pull up the footlockers. They say, everybody gather around in a circle. This is 2 days before we graduate boot camp. We're going to do a gong show. What's that? They say, well, we want you to do your best imitations of us and of your fellow people in the troop. And like everybody, I had no idea. People are like, oh, do that imitation. Like all these friends knew their friends had good imitations that they'd been whispering at night. So they get up and do that. And it's like, artificial intelligence replicate. It's like exactly the voice of these guys, like
Uh-huh.
the cadets were just doing perfect imitations. And it just showed how deeply all of these people, recruits and DIs, had become embedded in our psyche and in our heart, that they were instantly recognizable. And I never laughed so hard, and it just tears rolling down the side of my face. I was like, unbelievable. Um, but yeah, it was weird because like then the next thing you know, you'd be taking a class on how to sneak up on a sentry and literally slit their throat with like a rubber knife, but somehow doing that with these guys just made me love them more, you know? And I wasn't anxious to slit anyone's throat, but it was just, it was like the craziest Boy Scouts camp you could ever imagine.
Yeah, way more intense than Boy Scouts, but yes.
Yeah.
I have a question. Did you finish college before you went and enlisted, or were you simultaneously, or did you drop out?
No, I was doing it simultaneously. So yeah, so I
Is
did, I
that
went away.
ROTC?
Nope, because that would be like the officer class. So
Okay.
I just enlisted. I left college for 1 year. I enlisted in the Marines. I went and did a year of active duty, which was like boot camp, Marine combat training, and the School of Infantry, and some other stuff. And so I was at Pendleton for that time. And then I rotated back to the States. I mean, back to UT Austin, and I joined my reserve unit in San Antonio, which is a reconnaissance unit, which is sort of like, it's a little bit like special forces for the Marines. Force recon is like the hardcore special forces. And we were a recon unit, an amphibious unit. So we were jumping out of helicopters into the ocean and doing like pontoon boats and stuff like that. It was really kind of fun, to be honest. Yeah.
It actually sounds fun when you
It was
take
fun.
the fighting out of it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if you were ever deployed.
No. And I felt so lucky about that. For a long time, I wanted to be deployed. I wanted to go to war. I was hardcore. I almost was bummed to leave to go to the reserves. That's how much I love the culture there. But I'm so grateful now because I see what happened to these very unfortunate vets who I care a great deal about. And I like help found this literary magazine at Columbia University that spotlights the writing of veterans. And but so I got all the benefits being in the Marine Corps, all the benefits without having to pay any of that extra horrid price of like maybe losing somebody or killing someone. I don't want that on my conscience, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you were in training during the first Iraq War. Is that right?
I signed up in 1992. So
after they'd come back.
Just after. But here's the really weird thing. Like I've spent my whole life thinking about like what we've been doing in Iraq starting from 1991. That war never ended. I mean, it is so weird. George Bush Sr. declared it over in 100 hours, but that war never ended through the 90s. We continued to send people in there, malign them. It's really nuts. So, but yes, I missed all that.
But considering the fact that we continue to have troops overseas, the fact that you were never a part of a group that was sent, it's sort of miraculous in a way. Like, I don't even know how you escaped that. Is it because you were simultaneously in college at that point?
No, they didn't call up the huge numbers during the 90s. In fact, there was a downscaling of the military. And in fact, that's what a large part of the 1981 Gulf War, all that air power they showed off, that was them trying to win contracts so the government wouldn't downscale the pay of everybody. And they just didn't need that kind of person power. So they were fine. In fact, I heard of really good Marines that were just sort of let go in the late 90s because there was no need to keep them. It was only after 9/11 everything ramped up.
Interesting. I think it's interesting too because like when I graduated in the mid 90s high school, like I didn't know what people were doing really. I just was very self-aware of what I had to do and what was expected of me. And like,
I think that's how a lot of us were back then.
Right. And you didn't have the internet. So there was no conscious awareness of, what other people and places were doing. But I do remember coming home after my first year and seeing, because I grew up in a very like diverse middle class neighborhood. So there was like, we had teachers and postal workers and plumbers and it's just all over the map. And it's a small town. I graduated with like, I think my graduating class was like 300 people. I don't remember, but in Detroit. So that's like sort of a big deal to be so small.
Yeah.
And I do remember like seeing the guys who had enlisted, no girls, no women, but the guys who had enlisted walking around in their t-shirts, like so proud in their like fatigues and t-shirts, like, at the shopping center, which was our little market. And it'd be like, oh, hey, Ryan. So is this a look now? No, I joined the military. Like, oh, why? You know, it was such, so to hear your perspective on it. And the whole time, did you know that you wanted to be a writer, or at any point in time did you think, oh, I'm going to make a career out of the military?
I thought I would make a career out of the military at one point. I thought like maybe I could finish up my college and like become an officer. I really believed in the Corps, and I do really believe in the values that it espouses. I just think that those get very crooked once you get out of the lower ranking enlisted and officer ranks. You get to the career officers, the people in the Pentagon. Those people are making very bad decisions, intentionally letting our people get maimed so that they can personally profit off of war making machinery from corporations. I mean, that's the essence of this sad situation. So I was all in the Marine Corps, and I still have been more deeply moved by the humanity of the people I served with than anyone, I think probably any other group of people that I've been with, except for I was in Korea for 5 years as a creative writing teacher, and that was very moving too. But I love those people were there for me when I needed them, when I was down, and I got up. Like after I got out of the Marines, everything changed. Just can't even describe to you what a huge change it was in my life. Like all my dreams started coming true, you know?
That's amazing. How long did you spend in the Marines?
In 4 years.
4 years. Okay.
Yeah. So you're doing like the weekend reserve stuff, and then they send, so it's 1 week in a month, which oddly comes up way more frequently than you would imagine. And then we do 2 weeks every summer, usually at Camp Pendleton, you do some sort of training. So it was this weird hybrid life. And like when I started taking creative writing classes from my first creative writing teacher, Ben Marcus, University of Texas at Austin, he's now at Columbia. So it's wild because I get to know him there. He was very important to me. He turned me on to like Dennis Johnson's Jesus is Son, and you know, like the Kafka parables, and just a whole bunch of like, you know, Tim O'Brien, all this like really crucial foundational texts. And so at the same time I'm taking that class and my mind is changing and I'm in the studio trying to write my short stories, once a month I gotta like put on my like helmet and my uniform and get all, you know, get my high and tight haircut and all that stuff and be dialed in and show up with those guys who were very hardcore. Like they all had their jump wings and their scuba bubbles. And the Marine unit I was at, that recon unit, they wanted, especially because I sort of looked a certain way, they wanted to send me to all those fancy schools, which would have been my dream come true until I met Ben Marcus, because my real dream was being a writer. And that kind of changed everything. So
how old were you when you met Ben Marcus?
22.
So you're young. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. So are you getting paid monthly when you're on the reserves? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
that
pretty
GI
cool.
Bill. Yeah, that was really cool. Like that was a big part of it too. You know, the appeal of that.
Yes.
I think it's impossible for anybody to ever name the one reason they went in the military. It's so complicated. It's very peculiar. So you sort of switch throughout time, different contexts are like, but at one time the GI Bill was like the main reason I went in, you know?
Yeah, of course.
And I'm sure for so many people, I mean, not I'm sure, I know that for so many people, that's why the GI Bill is there. It's very attractive. It's lucrative. It opens doors that otherwise are not available to be open to many people.
Yeah, we've had several artists on the show that went into the military in college, and the whole purpose was because they needed money.
Right. And the GI Bill.
What you often see, and not to undercut the GI Bill, but what we often see is that, I don't want to call it a bait and switch, because you know what the possibilities are. But you go in with the promises of a better life. But if things go sideways, or rather if they go, the kind of the intended purpose of being in the military is to be sent into combat. And should you pull that card, that better life maybe isn't as available anymore or possible.
Right. I think that's true. What's really funny though is there's so much about the military that is bait and switch that I think that the GI Bill is one of the lesser bait and switches. Like so many people end up on paths they did not know they were going on when they signed up. I'll tell you a funny story is like, so when back then we would do boot camp, then Marine combat training at Camp Pendleton, and that's reasonably hardcore stuff. And that's so like every Marine can be a rifleman first, and then after that you go to your various schools. And so this guy, though, he signed like a blank contract. He was pretty hardcore, and so he got a piece of paper at the end of Marine combat training telling him what his new job would be in the Marine Corps. He didn't know, right? And he was hardcore, and he opened it right in front of us. I didn't really like this guy that much, and he saw it said cook. He was a cook, and I have never seen someone lose their mind. Like, he was going to be a cook for the next 4 years. And we didn't want to laugh too hard because we knew that guy would like jump on us and start hitting us or something. But I've never forgotten seeing such a seismic shift in someone's life just determined by an arbitrary piece of paper like that. Cook.
It's so funny that you just said we didn't want to laugh too hard because he'd jump on us and start hitting us. And I mean, like, that's so much Gronk in the Teenage Dragon. It's just like, that's the language you use. No. Like, sometimes it's just like, I'm like, it is so, I talking to you is crazy because like, oh, he sounds like his book. Like, these stories are mimicking.
That's funny.
It's so good.
That. Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah. I don't think I've actually heard that exactly, but I hope so.
I mean, just the like way you just said about that guy, I'm like, oh my God, that is totally, the jocks in the book who just like, you snort funny and bam, you're eaten, you're gone, you're dust.
Jaime, you were asking me like about college, like did it pay for the GI Bill?
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to say is many of us know, coming from like, solid middle class families, like the GI Bill built America's middle class, coming out of, and like my father's a GI Bill guy, and everyone I knew's mother was a GI Bill guy. So I felt there was something very interesting of like engaging with this that had been so central for the previous generation, the GI Bill.
Yeah, which also confuses me. Like, so my grandfather was an immigrant, and he ended up being...
Where did he immigrate from?
He was from England, but they were poor, and they came over, and they were kids. They lost their mom, and they were put into foster care through the Salvation Army. And then he enlisted, and so he had to go to Canada to fight, and then the U.S. brought him down because they needed more men for the U.S. Yeah. But then they paid for him to go to engineering school. Like, he got 3 engineering degrees through the government, and for having served. And then, it made his life different. Like, I would be somebody else had he not been an engineer, had he not done this, right? And then you get to my father. That's not his dad, but my father's grandfather, or dad, my other grandfather, like, enlisted because he believed in the cause in World War II, obviously. Like, it was pivotal to him. And he became an officer right away. Like, he was named general after boot camp because he came from more means and education and whatever, and they put him over in France. Now, my point in saying this is they did everything possible to keep my dad out of Vietnam. Like, they did, and he was terrible in school. But, like, they didn't want him to be drafted. Like, my grandfather saw all his best friends die on the front line.
They, meaning your older family members.
Yeah, and so they just did not want my dad in Vietnam at all, and they did everything they could to prevent their son from being drafted. And then my parents did the same thing. Like, my brother was born with juvenile diabetes, and he was really sick and almost died like our whole childhood. He was always in the hospital.
I'm sorry.
A door away from death. It was terrifying. And I remember distinctly the moment my parents said, at least he'll never be drafted. Like, it was like the fear that their parents had put into them because of World War II, and then living through Vietnam, and the fear that, my mom married my dad very young because he could be drafted, and she wanted to be his wife before that happened. Like, it's weird to me that you signed up and that, like, your dad was supportive of that because he was in Vietnam. I feel like we had a different sort of...
Oh, I don't think he was supportive. He was he's anti-war. But he does not want me to be like a spoiled white kid from the suburbs. And he
Absolutely. Yeah.
thought, this guy's stumbling. He just went and did this on his own. You can't turn it around now. Let's see what happens, and I started writing people letters back then because we didn't have internet so much, and started
Yeah.
writing him letters. And my mind got calm. Like I would say for the first 2 weeks of boot camp, I had dreams about my past. Then like for the next couple of weeks I had dreams about my present, and then in the next couple of weeks I had dreams about my future. It was really interesting. My mind just calmed down, almost like I would say there's almost something Buddhist about boot camp. It is devoid of advertisement. It is devoid of any kind of like real technology except for munitions. You are running and singing for the first time in your life with groups of guys, and you're singing songs that are over 100 years old that you've never heard before, but they put the hair up on the back of your neck. Like this stuff, that's like a spiritual experience of sorts. At least it was for me, who didn't come up with religion. So it was just deeply affecting to my spirit, and it allowed me to just calm down in life, and then like kind of feel proud, feel strong, feel like you could just tell me to stand at attention over there for 8 hours. I could do it. I could run up a mountain and tackle someone, or whatever I needed to do. I could do it. And I watch little weakling guys. That's one thing I want to say about the Marines. It's not full of like it's not always these hardcore guys. A lot of them are guys that got beat up a lot, right? And this is their last chance to kind of get tough. And I watched them do it. And it was like, I think some of them wanted to go home and beat up that bully that had hurt them all their lives. And I wish them all the power with it. So you get a real odd mix of folks in there. But the thing is once you go through, everyone's done it. It's like that does bond you together,
And do you think that like America should have a policy like Israel where we should all serve for a year or two, and then your college is paid for, and also you know how to defend your country and yourself, and have a more worldly experience when you go out to be a worker of any kind?
I think it would be great. So I have like my views on this stuff continue to evolve, especially as I get older. I'm like, okay, now you really got to have some wise or some outlook on this that reflects your maturity. And so I think I love the military. I think we should have it, but I don't think we should ever use it. Like it should be amazing, but we should never use it. The moment you enter a war, either side, you lose. That's like the big con game out there from the leaders in the military and in the government. We're going to win this war. A war is not winnable. It should be illegal to use the word win in the same sentence as war. Everybody loses. Everybody loses their humanity. So I love the military. It reminds me of this incredible, like a sports team,
Yeah.
And I think it'd be great for everyone to experience that. But I also don't think we should ever use our military, because if we do, we've already lost.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Perhaps a forced service, maybe not military service, but some form of community service. 2 years.
And also any kind of service, I think, is really good. I liked wearing a uniform. I was proud to wear it. Now I think in the aftermath of the global war on terror, there's very mixed perceptions about the military. And I think the military is degraded. I don't think like the quality of the personnel is what it used to be. I think Bush, I cried on the night that we did the shock and awe to Iraq, because I knew that this horror landscape that we live in now was coming. I knew he was throwing a generation in the trash can, and that we would see things like the rise of assault weapons. He also let the assault weapons expire in 2004. I knew we were coming to this hellscape, and now we're here. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. I mean, I think the attack on 106, if you look at that, that's very similar to the attack that we did to Saddam Hussein's government buildings. I mean, our guys were in there defecating on the floor, putting their feet up on desks. It's like we brought this on ourselves. Like we tried to export democracy, and we destroyed our democracy. We tried to go fight terrorism, and we became full of domestic terrorists. Like it is So it's more complicated now talking about the military and stuff, but I still always care so much about those individuals on the ground because they had no choice. And those are great people. And but like I said, I'm so glad I don't have that baggage, that I didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
I don't remember where I read it, but I do remember reading this comparison between the military and organized religion, and how if you look at the people that make it up, it's pure, it's good, it's and they are individually made better.
Mhm.
But um but then when you step back and look at the what's above it, and how the whole thing is utilized and manipulated, that's when
Yeah.
it gets dirty, and that's when it gets
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Cheney getting all those Halliburton, like all the
yeah.
people on the ground in Iraq were working. It was so clearly for them to profit. Naomi Klein has some wonderful writing about this and insights. And I mean, she is just gobsmacked that the American public is not more freaked. We've never had an administration just wholesale, just ripping off America like that in front of their faces, and doing it with impunity. I mean,
Yeah.
what Bush did was so much worse than Trump. I mean, I loathe Trump, but Bush brought so much bloodshed. And when you torture, I
Yeah.
mean, a democracy, can it survive that? It's not clear that it can. Because once you lower the bar so low on our behavioral standards, then you end up with these nutty politicians firing their guns off in their commercials. It unleashed a devil in our country, I think, that I think many historians would say has been there all along, but
Yes.
maybe we just didn't feel it as much in the 90s.
That's what I was going to say. It's just so farcical that it reads like satire when I see
Yeah.
it on social media. I'm like, this isn't, oh, this is real.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
This is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Let me ask then, because I would like to, at some point you were discharged, and
Yes.
you went back to Texas, and then this new career, the real career, took off.
Writer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Writer. Yes.
Yeah.
And
It was yeah. Go ahead.
Please. Well, my question.
It was an amazing. I wrote about this in one of my I wrote about this on Substack about my post about Cormac McCarthy, because it was just so fortuitous timing on my part. So I got out of the Marines, but when I got out of the Marines, I would still look like a Marine. I was a Marine. I think I even wore my dog tags for a while in civilian world. A little embarrassed about that, but I reported to my unit, recon unit in San Antonio, and I resumed school at the University of Texas at Austin. First semester back, I speak to the counselor, and he knows I want to become like a writer. And he's like, there's this hotshot young guy who's visiting. His class is full, but if you go talk to him, and he says, yes, I can still let you in. So that was Ben Marcus. And I go in. Ben Marcus is like 28, wearing cargo shorts, some high tops. His first book, The Age of Wire and String, is about to drop from Knopf like a month later. And I go in and I see him. I say, hey, I want to take your class. Can I take your class? I see that you have Blood Meridian on your syllabus. He goes, I love that book. I was like, I love that book. I want to go meet Cormac McCarthy, who lives down in El Paso. I said, will you let me in your class? He said, yes. And he signed the thing. And it was like, next thing I know, that guy's like calling on me to like read my work out loud. He sort of like wailed at the class one day about how they weren't paying attention to their language as seriously as they should. And then he like pointed to me and my work as like somebody who was. And he just, when in his office hours, he was like, you should apply for an MFA. Like, I can help you with that. He introduced me to like Gordon Lish and all those writers, Brian Evanson, the Quarterly magazine. I mean, he opened up a whole world to me, and I loved it. I ate it up. I just couldn't get enough. And
he sounds like the best teacher ever.
He was incredible. And
yeah.
then, so anyway, so he left then to go take a tenured position at Old Dominion, which he stayed at for 1 semester, and then he went to Brown. But in that time, he and I continued to send letters because we were not so emaily back then. And I would send him long letters about like books I was reading, Michael Undaji's early works, you know, the collected works of Billy the Kid, just cool stuff. And he turned me on to that. And so he would like write back. And then I sent out some stories and they immediately got published. Like in the Berkeley Fiction Review. It was like my first time ever. I put it in an SASE so cool. and sent it off, and it pubbed in the Berkeley Fiction Review. And in the next semester, also when he was gone, I won the like top prize in the creative writing in the English department, the creative writing prize with like a cash prize. Like it was nuts. And like the professors, they came up to me and they were like, how did you write this? Like, it was not even close. You were so number one, you know? And I was just like, oh my God, this is like my dreams come true. And then I applied to Brown, and obviously because of Ben, you know, in large part, I got in, and it was a full fellowship. So they paid for everything. Oh, and, you know, I went from being a GD kid in the enlisted Marines to like a fully funded Brown guy, who then they let me teach my own class that semester, in those 2 years, which was wild.
Yeah. I love this story. I have goosebumps.
Yeah.
This is so good.
It was so special. And it felt like it came out of that Marine time. Like when I told you about the like Buddhist aspect of being like, just the way you get calm inside yourself, and you could sort of see what's important to you, and you have an opportunity and someone's opening a door and you're going to go for it. And I just couldn't have been more excited about everything, you know?
But I want to point out that you are so humble and like, you know, very honest about, I dropped out, I got a GED, then I did this, I wasn't doing so great. And then I did this, but like through all of that, I think you know, a star was rising, you know, you weren't, I think what we fail to see sometimes is that people don't do well in certain structures because there's something different going on in their brain and how they function and how things are translating for them. And it sounds like you're a real story guy, you know, like, okay, I know how to say this, Jaime, work on it. I just think it fell into place because you did all these other things and you had so much to say that when you were able to be vulnerable, which takes some time, and it sounds like the military allowed you to be vulnerable when you left, that vulnerability translated so well to an audience that everybody ate you up. Like it's what people needed to read. It's what people needed to hear. It's what people needed to see, right? Like it's just so honest and transparent, you know? And I think that, you know, reading your stuff, you really do talk to everyone. Nothing you write feels impossible or imposed or like
and I work at it to make
reach.
it like that. I work at it to make it like that. You know, like I think
it's gonna make me cry. It's
to
so
like,
wonderful.
To be accessible and to be able to speak to like a lot of people, you know, it's like, it's funny. It takes work. I know you know that, but I'm just saying that for the benefit of anybody listening, because I know sometimes,
I appreciate,
you know, Kurt Vonnegut was sort of my writing hero, was often maybe disparaged for having simple sentences. And I mean, it's like the art of what he did cannot be overstated. And it's just because it's not sweaty. I liken it to like a joke, like a really cool joke just happens. And before you know it, you're laughing. A sweaty joke that sounds labored is not as funny, and it doesn't have the same effect. And his jokes are just like seamless, you know?
Yeah. This has been an amazing episode. We're so excited for it to air. We thank Gabe for being here, and we will link to Gabe's information, his podcast, in the show notes. I mean, I feel like everybody who listens to this already knows who you are, but nonetheless.
Okay.
We'll make it easy for them.
Nonetheless. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys.
Made love on Tuesday, on Wednesday she was down. We fought on Thursday, made up on Friday, but now I'm losing ground. You call me lazy, you think I'm crazy, so why'd you come around? She want my money, but I got no money. This ain't no savings and loan. I'm crazy, so why'd you call